Ever wonder what would happen if a so-called open and shut court case turned into a mind-blowing revelation? You're about to hear a courtroom story so unexpected, it left a judge and everyone else speechless. Get ready, because this account of a teenager standing up to the legal system might just make you see our courts in a whole new light. The clock was ticking past noon, inside the Crescentwood County Courthouse. Yet the day felt heavy. The air was thick enough to choke on. Part anticipation, part quiet dread. Rows of spectators crowded the benches, whispering among themselves, craning their necks to glimpse the young man at the defense table. Towering above them all on her elevated bench was Judge Francine Crowder, a woman known for quick decisions and little patience. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a well-worn gavel against a polished desk. Behind her, the massive courtroom windows revealed a breezy afternoon sun, but inside, the mood was anything but light. No one in the gallery would have guessed that this session would end up making legal history, least of all the judge herself. From her smug expression, it was clear she believed the day's proceedings would be simple. Another defendant, another guilty plea, another case off the docket. If only it were that easy. Meet Troy Ellis, just 19 years old, scrawny, wearing a borrowed collared shirt that seemed a size too big. At first glance, he looked like any other defendant who'd made a rash choice. The charge? Grand theft auto, plus resisting arrest. A serious accusation, especially in the eyes of Judge Crowder. But Troy had a secret advantage that no one in the courtroom anticipated. While most teens spent their free time playing sports or scrolling through social media, Troy found refuge in something else: the intricate world of legal study. His mother, Marjorie Ellis, had worked as a paralegal for over 2 decades, and Troy absorbed every story she shared from the office. Trials, precedents, cross-examinations, these fascinated him more than any video game or TV show. From the moment he could fully grasp the concept of a legal argument, Troy started reading actual case files. At 15, while classmates memorized football stats, Troy devoured law journals. At 16, he was holding mock debates at school, stunning teachers who had no idea how he got so well versed in courtroom procedures. But here he was, a defendant, not a student observer. To Judge Crowder, Troy was just another kid who ended up on the wrong side of the law. The judge's tone dripped with condescension, and it was clear he wanted to wrap things up quickly. Little did he know, Troy was about to prove that the real story went far beyond a mere stolen car. Across the aisle stood Robert Keene, the prosecutor. His confidence was evident in his crisp suit, shiny shoes, and the calm way he arranged his papers on the table. To him, Troy Ellis was just another defendant with no chance of fighting back, especially with serious allegations like these. Keene began with a theatrical clearing of his throat. "Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that Troy Ellis was found behind the wheel of a stolen sedan X1, an expensive car reported missing that very afternoon. The arresting officers claim the defendant attempted to flee on foot when they approached." He spoke in that unwavering tone lawyers often use when they feel they've got a guaranteed win. The mention of Troy's fingerprints on the steering wheel made the spectators mutter. To the untrained ear, the evidence was straightforward. Stolen car, chasing suspect, immediate arrest. Most people in that situation would be petrified. Troy, however, stood with his chin slightly raised, listening carefully. He wasn't fidgeting, and he didn't look the least bit rattled. Judge Crowder raised an eyebrow. "Sounds pretty convincing," she remarked, earning a smug nod from Robert Keene. Around them, the bailiff, the court clerk, even some of the jury members seemed to accept the claims. Normally, a public defender would step in, offering a standard not guilty plea or seeking a plea deal. Indeed, Bella Roberts, the court-appointed attorney, stood at Troy's side. But before she could utter a full sentence, Troy placed a gentle hand on her arm and asked if he could speak for himself. "Your Honor," Troy began, looking up at Judge Crowder, "I'll be defending myself." An immediate hush fell on the room. No one moved. No one breathed. Defending yourself in court is a massive risk, especially for a teenager with no official legal credentials. The judge peered over her glasses, fighting off a dry chuckle. The prosecutor's lips curled into a slight sneer, as if amused by the idea of a kid playing lawyer. Serious, his posture, his calmness. It all suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. That shift in the courtroom, from laughter to uneasy anticipation, set the tone. People stopped underestimating him, at least those who were paying attention. Troy's first target was the testimony of Officer Carter, the policeman who supposedly saw Troy driving the stolen car. The official report stated that Officer Carter witnessed Troy behind the wheel. Troy, addressing the judge and the jury, calmly said, "Your Honor, I'd like to request verification of Officer Carter's GPS logs from that night. If he claims he saw me in the car, he must have been on the scene at the exact time of the theft, right?" There was a collective pause. Robert Keene cleared his throat and objected, stating that the police report should be enough. Troy didn't miss a beat. If the officer was where he claimed, the GPS logs will confirm it. And if the logs show otherwise, then his testimony about seeing me might not be true. The judge leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. The jury began to exchange glances. Suddenly, the prosecutor's confidence was no longer rock solid. The request was a simple one: confirm an officer's location. But the hesitation from Keene spoke volumes. Then, Troy moved on to the fingerprint evidence. "The prosecution says my fingerprints on the wheel prove I was the thief," he said. "But imagine picking up a jacket in a store, then leaving it behind. If that jacket ends up stolen by someone else hours later, do your prints make you the culprit?" He questioned why no forensic specialist was called to testify about the chain of custody or potential contamination. He brought up small details, like how the car was left unlocked in front of a convenience store, and he'd briefly touched the door out of curiosity. This was typical teenage mischief, perhaps, but not grand theft auto. By now, half the jury appeared intrigued, even sympathetic. Next, Troy flipped to a page in his neatly organized file. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a statement from the car's owner, Aaron Willard." He read directly from the transcript. "I left my car running while I dashed inside the gas station. I spotted somebody jump in and drive off. That person was not Troy Ellis. It was a different individual entirely." A stunned silence fell over the room. The official description by the owner didn't match Troy in any way. "Mr. Willard told officers the actual thief was a taller, older individual," Troy explained. "And yet, that part never made it to the prosecution's main exhibits. Why?" Robert Keene looked visibly tense now, rifling through his notes. The cracks in his once airtight case were growing into gaping holes. Each new piece of evidence Troy introduced showed how assumptions had led law enforcement to corner him, perhaps in an attempt to close the case quickly. What was even more shocking was that the car had been found abandoned miles away from where Troy was actually arrested. He wasn't caught driving. He was walking with friends at the wrong place at the wrong time. "This entire case hinges on me being behind the wheel," Troy said. "Without that, there's nothing left." By this point, the gallery was abuzz with whispers. Judge Crowder tapped his gavel lightly for order, but the tension was already on the brink of eruption. Robert Keene made a final attempt to salvage the case. "Your Honor," he insisted, "the defendant's fingerprints were still on that car." But the judge's expression had changed. He removed his glasses, rubbed his temples, and turned to Troy. "Young man," he said, "do you have anything else to say in your defense?" Troy's voice was even, just that I was never in that car when it was taken. The real suspect is still out there because the police decided someone who looks like me was close enough. Murmurs rippled through the room as Troy looked at the jury. "I don't think we should convict people based on assumptions." The judge nodded slowly, turning his gaze to the jury. Then, after a silent pause that felt like an eternity, she declared, "Case dismissed." The floodgates opened. Spectators gasped, journalists scribbled furiously, and courthouse staff exchanged looks of disbelief. Troy Ellis remained calm, quietly gathering his papers. He glanced up at Judge Crowder, whose demeanor had softened. Gone was the condescension. In its place was a hint of respect, or maybe regret, for having dismissed the possibility that this defendant was anything but guilty. Before Troy could leave, Judge Crowder called out, "Ellis, hold on." Troy stopped at the doorway. "You ought to consider law school," the judge said. Troy offered a small nod. He was already thinking about that, and more. What did this case really reveal? In the hustle to identify suspects, corners can be cut. Assumptions can replace facts. People who lack the education or resources to defend themselves end up behind bars for crimes they never committed. If Troy, with his years of self-taught law, hadn't challenged the testimony, would he have gone to prison? The ripples of this case spread far beyond Crescentwood County. It's a harsh reminder that our justice system, run by human beings, is vulnerable to errors and bias. One slip in procedure, one overlooked witness statement, or one inaccurate assumption can cost an innocent person their freedom or their life. Troy's journey didn't stop at the courthouse doors. Energized by his victory, he made up his mind to pursue a legal career, not just for personal glory, but to stand up for those who can't argue their way out of false accusations. There's a glaring gap between those who understand their rights and those who don't, and Troy wants to bridge that gap. In the weeks that followed, local news outlets buzzed with debates about proper police procedure. Some questioned Officer Carter's reliability. Others demanded an internal review of how the prosecution had handled the case. Meanwhile, a handful of other defendants, seeing Troy's success, began requesting more thorough examinations of their own evidence. If one bright teenager could turn a slam-dunk case upside down, what else might be possible when you peel back the layers of complacency? So the next time you hear about a slam-dunk case, remember Troy Ellis. Remember how he stood alone, refused to back down, and used knowledge as his shield. Think about how many others never get that chance because they don't know the system or can't afford a decent attorney. If this story made you question how justice works, or if you felt even a hint of outrage, let that feeling linger. Share the story. Talk about it. The law is designed to be fair, but fairness only thrives when ordinary people hold the system accountable. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories that cut deeper than the headlines, because the next time someone stands accused, it could be you or someone you care about. And as Troy's case proves, knowledge can be the difference between losing it all and walking free. Stay curious, stay informed, and never forget. Sometimes the biggest challenge to injustice can come from the most unexpected places.